My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 62 years old. The text that shattered my world. Read, Mom, don't come on the cruise tomorrow. Emily prefers just her family. Just her family. Decades of sacrifice. Erased in 12 words. I stared at my packed suitcase and realized everything I believed was a lie. What happened next changed my life forever. Before I tell you how this story unfolds, please like this video. Subscribe and hit the bell. You won't want to miss what comes next. The dress was the color of Caribbean water, that particular shade of blue that exists only in travel brochures and dreams. I held it against my chest, studying my reflection in the bedroom mirror, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something close to joy. 62 years old, and I was finally going somewhere. The suitcase lay open on my bed, like a mouth waiting to be fed. I'd already packed the sensible things: sunscreen, medications, comfortable shoes. But now came the treasures. The pearl necklace my mother wore on her wedding day, a paperback I'd been saving, the little bottle of perfume I bought specifically for the first night's dinner. When I'd sit beside Daniel and Emily and celebrate my son turning 35, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I remember smiling as I reached for it. Probably Daniel, I thought, confirming the departure time or asking if I needed anything. He'd been planning this cruise for months, kept saying how much it meant to him that I'd be there. It wouldn't be the same without you, Mom, he'd said over dinner last month, squeezing my hand across the table. The screen glowed with his name. Mom, don't come on the cruise tomorrow. Emily prefers just her family going. I read it once, then again. The words didn't change. My first instinct was to laugh. Surely this was a joke, some terrible miscommunication. I stared at those two sentences until they blurred, my thumb hovering over the call button, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the period after going, so final, like a door slamming, or maybe it was the word prefers, as if my presence was a menu option. Emily could simply decline. The dress slipped from my hands onto the bed. Her family, just her family. The memories came unbidden, sharp as broken glass. Working double shifts at the diner and the department store, so Daniel could attend that expensive summer program, selling Tom's vintage Mustang, the one thing he'd left me besides our son, to help pay for their wedding. Emily's cool smile when I handed over the check. You really didn't have to, Margaret, she'd said, but her eyes said something different. I looked at the suitcase, at the dress, at the necklace that had survived 60 years only to bear witness to this moment. My fingers moved across the screen, almost mechanically. Understood, son. Have a good trip. I hit send before the tears could blur my vision, but they came anyway, hot and sudden, streaming down my face as I stood alone in the bedroom I'd slept in for 30 years. The same room where I'd nursed Daniel through fevers, read him bedtime stories, assured him after his father died that we'd be okay, that we'd always have each other. Outside, Seattle's autumn rain began to fall, tapping against the window like fingers seeking entrance. The suitcase remained open, my half-packed life exposed to the empty room. I should close it, I thought, put everything away, but I couldn't move. The phone stayed silent on the nightstand. No follow-up text, no. Just kidding, Mom. No. Let me explain. Just silence. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my hand finding the blue dress. The fabric felt different now, not like hope or adventure, but like evidence of my own foolishness. What had I been thinking? That at 62, after everything I'd sacrificed, I'd earned a place at my own son's celebration. The rain grew heavier, drumming a rhythm that sounded almost like laughter. I folded the dress slowly, precisely, and placed it back in the drawer where it belonged. Then I turned off the light and lay down fully clothed on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling as the room darkened around me. Tomorrow they would sail without me. Tomorrow I would wake up to this new understanding that family isn't always built on the foundation you think it is. 3 days passed like years. I stopped sleeping. Not in the dramatic way people describe insomnia in books, but in the quiet, grinding way where you lie in bed for 8 hours and your mind simply refuses to rest. Every creak of the house became accusatory. Every shadow on the ceiling spelled out the same question. What did you do wrong? The suitcase still sat on my bedroom floor, half open like a wound I couldn't quite close. I'd wake at dawn and see it there, and the whole thing would crash over me again. The blue dress, the message, The casual cruelty of those 12 words. I tried to function, made coffee I didn't drink, turned on the television to voices I didn't hear. The neighbor's cat watched me through the kitchen window with what looked like pity, and I resented her for it. On the second day, I found myself standing in Daniel's old bedroom. I hadn't been in there for months. He'd taken most of his things when he married Emily, left only the furniture and some boxes of high school memorabilia. I sat on his bed and opened the closet, where a single jacket still hung, the one he wore to his father's funeral. He was 16 then, all sharp angles and grief he didn't know how to name. I held that jacket against my face and breathed in the ghost of who he used to be. "We'll get through this together, Mom," he'd whispered at the cemetery, his hand gripping mine so tight it hurt. "It's just us now, but that's enough. That's more than enough." The memory felt like a lie now. Emily had always been careful with me, never overtly cruel, just distant, cold smiles at family dinners, polite thank yous that felt like dismissals. She'd rearrange my gifts to Daniel, flowers I brought, the sweater I knitted, until they disappeared into some back room. As if my love was clutter to be managed, and Daniel he'd stopped noticing, or maybe he'd chosen not to. I thought of all the times I'd bitten my tongue. The Christmas when Emily seated her mother at the head of the table, my table, in my house, and I'd said nothing. The birthday when Daniel forgot to call, and Emily's apologetic text arrived 2 days later. "So sorry. We've been swamped." The slow erasure of my presence in their lives. So gradual, I almost didn't notice it happening, until the cruise, until the line in the sand became impossible to ignore. On the third day, I couldn't stand it anymore. The walls of my house had become a prison, each room echoing with what I'd lost. I needed to see water, needed to feel something larger than this suffocating grief. I drove to the harbor where the cruise ships docked. The parking lot was nearly empty, the departure having happened 2 days earlier. I sat in my car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the cargo vessels and ferries move through the gray water. The Seattle skyline stood sharp against the autumn clouds, indifferent to my pain. When I finally stepped out, the wind hit me immediately, cold and bracing, tasting of salt and diesel fuel. I walked to the edge of the pier and looked at the empty berth where their ship would have been. They were somewhere in the Pacific now, laughing, drinking, celebrating. Emily's family, just her family, taking photographs I'd never see, making memories I'd been deliberately excluded from. I imagined Daniel on the deck, the sun on his face, and wondered if he thought of me at all, if there was a moment, just one, where he felt the absence of the woman who'd given up everything to make his life possible. The water below was dark, choppy, unforgiving. "Excuse me," a voice said behind me. "Are you waiting for someone to embark?" I turned to find an elegant woman standing a few feet away, her white hair pulled into an immaculate bun, her eyes kind but knowing. "No," I heard myself say. "I'm waiting for something that already left." She smiled, sad, understanding, and moved to stand beside me at the railing. "Funny," she said softly, looking out at the water. "So am I." Her name was Helen Brooks, and she had the kind of face that made you believe she'd survived things worth surviving. We stood there at the railing, two women united by absence, watching the gulls wheel and cry above the choppy water. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was the comfortable quiet of shared understanding, the kind you can only have with strangers who recognize their own pain in someone else. "My grandson," Helen said eventually, her voice carrying easily over the wind. "Connor, 28 years old and convinced the world revolves around his needs. He forgot to tell me the cruise departure time changed. Gave my ticket to his girlfriend instead." I felt something crack open in my chest. "My son?" I said. 35. His wife decided I wasn't family enough to attend his birthday celebration. Helen turned to look at me fully then, and I saw something fierce flicker in her eyes. "Decided you weren't family enough, my dear. You made that family. You built it from scratch. I'd wager. Am I right?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Single mother?" she asked. "Widowed when he was 16. And let me guess. You worked yourself to the bone, making sure he had everything he needed. Education, opportunities, a wedding that cost more than your annual salary." The accuracy of her words made my eyes sting. "How did you..." Because I did the same thing. Helen's laugh was bitter but somehow musical. Raised Connor after his parents died. Gave up my career, my savings, my life. Walked him down the aisle last year at his wedding. Beautiful ceremony. I paid for half of it. She paused, gripping the railing tighter. The bride thanked a real family in her speech. Connor said nothing. We stood in that terrible recognition of each other. Two women who'd loved too much and received too little. Coffee, Helen asked suddenly. There's a cafe 2 blocks from here that makes a decent cup, and I have a feeling we both need something stronger than seawater and regret. I surprised myself by laughing. I'd like that. The cafe was small and warm, with steamed windows and the rich smell of espresso. Helen ordered us both lattes and insisted on paying, waving away my protests with an imperious hand that reminded me she'd once been someone important, someone who made decisions and expected them to be followed. Over coffee, she told me about her life before Connor. She'd been an architect, had designed 3 buildings that still stood in downtown Seattle. Her husband died young, her daughter and son-in-law in a car accident when Connor was 5. She'd given up her firm to raise him. I don't regret raising him, she said carefully, stirring sugar into her cup. But I regret losing myself in the process. I stopped being Helen Brooks, the architect, the woman who loved art galleries and travel and late-night conversations about impossible buildings. I became just Grandma, just a function, just the woman who wrote checks and asked nothing in return. How did you stop? I asked, genuinely curious, because she radiated something I didn't have, a centeredness, a peace that seemed impossible to achieve. I got angry, Helen said simply. Really, properly angry. And then I decided that anger was just another form of energy, and I could use it to fuel something better than bitterness. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. Margaret, may I call you Margaret? Please. Margaret, the cruelest thing about loving someone who doesn't value it is that you start to believe you're not valuable. But here's what I learned. Their failure to appreciate you is their poverty, not yours. You're not diminished by their blindness. I felt tears threatening again. I don't know how to not love my son. I'm not asking you to stop loving him. I'm asking you to start loving yourself with equal measure. Helen pulled a napkin toward her and began writing. I have a proposal for you. Something that helped me and might help you. She slid the napkin across the table. On it was an address in Miami and a name, Marina del Sol Resort. A friend of mine runs volunteer programs there, Helen explained. They need mature women, women with grace and experience, to coordinate cultural events. Room and board included, 3-month commitment, but it often turns into more. Miami, the word felt foreign in my mouth, or anywhere, really. The point is movement. The point is proving to yourself that you still exist when you're not standing in someone else's shadow. I stared at the napkin, at Helen's elegant handwriting, at this impossible door she'd just opened. Think about it, she said gently. The sea is still waiting, Margaret. It just might be on a different shore. Outside, the rain had started again, but inside the cafe, I felt the first spark of something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. Helen's home was nothing like I'd imagined, though I'm not sure what I expected. Perhaps some modest apartment, a quiet retirement space. Instead, she lived in a stunning mid-century house perched on the edge of Lake Union, all glass and natural wood, with views that made your breath catch. I designed it 30 years ago, she said as I stood in her living room, mesmerized by the wall of windows overlooking the water. Refused to give it up even when Connor suggested I downsize. This house and I have an understanding. We both refuse to apologize for taking up space. I laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. When was the last time I'd refused to apologize for anything? Helen moved through her kitchen with practiced ease, preparing tea in a ceramic pot that looked Japanese and expensive. Everything in her home spoke of a life deliberately chosen. Art books stacked on tables, photographs of buildings she'd designed, a telescope pointed at the sky. You're wondering how I afford this on a widow's pension, she said, not looking up from the tea. I wasn't. You were. And it's fine. I'm pragmatic. She brought the tea to the low table between us. I invested wisely, sold my firm instead of letting it dissolve, bought this property when it was considered too remote. Now it's worth 10 times what I paid. I learned early that financial independence is the only kind of independence that matters. I thought of my own modest savings. The life insurance money from Tom that I'd spent on Daniel's education. The nest egg that had become a nest with nothing left to protect. I spent everything on him, I admitted quietly. Of course you did. That's what mothers do. We give until we're empty, and then figure out how to give some more. Helen poured the tea, the steam rising between us. But here's the question no one asks. Who fills us back up? I had no answer. We talked for hours that afternoon. Helen told me about the year after Connor's betrayal, how she'd forced herself to reconnect with old colleagues, to travel to Barcelona alone, to remember what it felt like to be someone other than someone's grandmother. She showed me photographs. Helen in front of the Sagrada Familia, Helen at a gallery opening, Helen laughing with friends whose names she'd almost forgotten. I was terrified, she confessed. Absolutely petrified. I was 70 years old, and I felt like I was starting from scratch. But you know what I discovered? Starting from scratch means you get to choose what to build this time. The Miami opportunity came up naturally in our conversation. She explained it carefully. How her friend Maria ran the resort. How they specifically wanted women with life experience. How it wasn't charity, but genuine work that mattered. I'm 62, I said. I've never done anything like event planning. You've planned a life, haven't you? You've managed schedules, budgets, emotions, crises. You've created beauty from nothing. I'd bet my house on it. Those skills translate, Margaret. But leaving Seattle, leaving what? Helen's voice was gentle but firm. A house that echoes. A city where every corner reminds you of what you've lost. A phone that doesn't ring. The truth of it stung. I'm scared, I whispered. Good. Fear means you're still alive enough to want something. It's indifference you should worry about. Helen reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was soft, but her grip was iron. I'm not telling you to run away. I'm telling you to run toward. There's a difference. Through the windows, the lake reflected the afternoon sun in shards of gold. A sailboat drifted past, its white sail brilliant against the water. The sea is still waiting, I said, echoing her words from the cafe. It just might be on a different shore, Helen finished. I thought about Daniel and Emily, probably back from their cruise by now. Had he called? Had he even noticed I wasn't trying to reach him? The questions felt less urgent here, in this house built by a woman who'd decided her own worth wasn't up for negotiation. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. But don't think too long. The world doesn't wait for women who've already waited too much. Helen stood, moving to a desk in the corner. She returned with a business card, Maria's contact information, embossed and official. When you're ready, if you're ready, but I hope you will be. I took the card, felt its weight in my palm. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. In the fading light, I could see my reflection in Helen's windows, a woman I barely recognized anymore, standing at a crossroads she didn't know existed 3 days ago. Helen, I said as she walked me to the door. Why are you doing this for me? You barely know me. She smiled, and in that smile, I saw decades of hard-won wisdom, because someone did it for me once, and because I see in you what I saw in myself, a woman who's forgotten she's more than what she gives away. I drove home as the stars emerged. Helen's card burning a hole in my pocket, carrying not just information but possibility, maybe even permission. The heat hit me like a living thing the moment I stepped off the plane. 2 months had passed since that afternoon in Helen's house. 2 months of phone calls with Maria, paperwork, selling furniture I didn't need, packing a life into 3 suitcases. Daniel had called once. 3 weeks after the cruise, I'd let it go to voicemail. His message was brief, awkward. Hey, Mom. Hope you're doing okay. Talk soon. I hadn't called back. Now I stood outside Miami International Airport, my skin already damp with humidity, watching palm trees sway against an impossibly blue sky. Seattle's gray felt like another lifetime. Maria met me outside baggage claim in a golf cart, her silver hair styled short, her smile genuine and warm. Margaret, finally, Helen's told me so much about you. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like coconut and confidence. Welcome to your new life, darling. Hope you're ready to work. The Marina del Sol resort sprawled across 12 acres of beachfront paradise, coral pink buildings with white trim, bougainvillea cascading over archways. the constant sound of waves providing a soundtrack to everything. Guests lounged by infinity pools, their laughter mixing with Latin music drifting from the poolside bar. My room was small but perfect. White walls, ceiling fan, a balcony overlooking the ocean. I stood there that first evening watching the sun melt into the water in shades of amber and rose, and felt something in my chest unlock. I could breathe here. The work was challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. I coordinated cultural events, salsa nights, wine tastings, art exhibitions featuring local artists. I learned to negotiate with vendors in broken Spanish, to manage schedules for guests from 6 different time zones, to smile through problems and find solutions that made everyone happy. And I was good at it, surprisingly, wonderfully good at it. "You have a gift for this," Maria told me after my first month, watching me manage a particularly chaotic gallery opening. "You make people feel seen. That's rarer than you think." I thought about that word. Seen. How long had it been since I'd felt that way? The guests loved me, or maybe they loved the version of me I was becoming. Confident, capable, present. Mrs. Kowalski from Cleveland called me a miracle worker. The honeymooners from Toronto sent me flowers. I was building something here, something that belonged to me alone. Then Richard Evans checked in. I noticed him during the welcome reception on a Thursday evening in late spring. He stood slightly apart from the other guests, a tall man in his mid-60s with silver hair and an air of quiet sadness that I recognized immediately. He held his champagne glass like he'd forgotten why he'd picked it up. "First time at Marina del Sol?" I asked, approaching with my practiced hospitality smile. He looked at me, and something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or relief at being acknowledged. First time anywhere in a while, actually. My daughter insisted I needed to get out more. His voice carried the faint accent of old money and Eastern education. "And do you need to get out more?" "I suppose she's not wrong." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Richard Evans, and you are?" "Margaret Thompson. I coordinate events here, if you need anything. Recommendations, reservations, someone to complain to. I'm your person. I'll keep that in mind." He paused, studying me with an intensity that should have felt invasive, but somehow didn't. "You don't sound like you're from Miami." "Seattle, transplanted 2 months ago. Running towards something or away from something." The question was too perceptive, too quick. I found myself answering honestly. "Both, I think." "The best decisions usually are," Richard said. Over the following days, I kept noticing him. He'd sit alone at breakfast, reading newspapers cover to cover. He'd walk the beach at sunset, hands in his pockets, looking like a man having serious conversations with ghosts. There was something magnetic about his solitude, not the desperate loneliness I'd felt in Seattle, but something more deliberate, more chosen. On his 4th evening, he appeared at the gallery event I was hosting. Local photography, haunting black and white images of the Everglades. "These are remarkable," he said, stopping beside me in front of a photograph of a mangrove forest, all twisted roots and filtered light. "The photographer's been studying the ecosystem for 20 years, says the mangroves are dying." "Everything's dying," Richard said quietly. "The question is what we do with the time we have while we're alive." I looked at him, really looked at him. Beneath the expensive clothes and careful composure, I saw exhaustion, grief, the particular weariness of someone carrying loss. "My wife died 2 years ago," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "Cancer, fast and ruthless. I haven't known what to do with myself since. My daughter thinks travel will help. I think she just wants me out of the house so she can stop worrying." "I'm sorry," I said. "Because what else was there?" "Don't be. She lived well, and we loved well. You can't ask for more than that." He turned to face me fully. "What's your story? Margaret Thompson from Seattle." So I told him, not everything, but enough. The cruise that never happened. The son who chose wrong. The woman who helped me remember I was more than someone's discarded mother. Richard listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving mine. "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow?" he asked when I finished. "Not as a guest and staff member, just as 2 people who understand what it's like to start over." I should have said no. There were probably rules about fraternizing with guests, but Maria's voice echoed in my head. You make people feel seen. Maybe it was time to let myself be seen too. The veranda at 8, I offered. Perfect, Richard said. And when he smiled this time, it reached his eyes. The veranda became our place. That first dinner stretched into 3 hours, conversation flowing as easily as the wine. Richard ordered sea bass. I chose the grouper. We talked about everything and nothing. Books we'd read, places we'd never been, the peculiar loneliness of living in a world that expected us to be fine when we weren't. I keep thinking I should be over it by now, Richard admitted, watching the moon rise over the ocean. 2 years is supposed to be enough time. According to everyone who hasn't lost a spouse, they look at me like I'm being dramatic, holding on to grief like it's a hobby. People are uncomfortable with long sadness, I said. They want grief to have an expiration date so they can stop worrying about saying the wrong thing. Exactly. He looked at me with something like gratitude. Sarah, my wife, she'd have liked you. She had no patience for people who couldn't sit with difficult emotions. Tell me about her. So he did. Sarah had been a professor of environmental science, passionate about conservation, always bringing home injured birds and insects that needed rehabilitation. Their house had been full of life and noise and purpose. Now it echoed. Our daughter keeps suggesting I sell it. Move into something more manageable, Richard said, as if the problem is square footage and not the absence of the person who made it home. I understood that more than he knew. My house in Seattle had become a mausoleum to failed motherhood long before I'd left it. What about you? He asked, refilling my wine glass. You mentioned a son. Have you spoken to him since Miami? Once he called to tell me he and Emily are expecting a baby. The words still tasted strange. I congratulated him. He asked when I was coming back to Seattle. I told him I wasn't sure. How did he respond? Silence. Then something about understanding I needed space. I laughed without humor. Space? As if I'm a teenager who slammed a door, not a mother who was told she wasn't family enough. Richard reached across the table and covered my hand with his. The gesture was simple, but it sent electricity through me. Not romantic exactly, but the shock of being touched with intention, with care. You speak about the ocean with such passion, he said softly, like it's something you've been waiting for your whole life. Maybe I have been. I just didn't know it until someone took away the substitute I'd been accepting. The dinners became routine. Every evening at 8, we'd meet on the veranda. Sometimes other guests would join us, and Richard would charm them with stories from his years running an architectural salvage business. But more often, we'd sit alone, watching the sky change colors and talking about the hard things, mortality, regret, the courage it takes to stay soft in a world that hardens you. I envy you, Richard said one night, about 3 weeks into our ritual. Why? You're rebuilding in real time. I can see it happening. You're becoming someone new every day. I'm just waiting for what? I don't even know. You're here, aren't you? That's not waiting, that's choosing. He smiled at that, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Richard Evans was a man accustomed to having answers, to fixing things, to making the world bend to his will through sheer competence. Grief had stripped that from him, left him uncertain in ways he'd never been before. I found myself thinking about him during the day, wondering if he'd liked the new exhibition, if he'd tried the chef's special, if he was okay, Maria noticed. That man looks at you like you're the first interesting thing he's seen in years, she said one afternoon, catching me watching Richard walk the beach. We're just friends. And I'm just the Queen of England having a casual career in hospitality. But it was true, in a way. We were friends. The kind of friendship that grows between people who've both stood at the edge of cliffs and chosen not to jump. There was no pressure, no performance, just presence. One evening, Richard brought a book to dinner, a collection of Mary Oliver poems. Listen to this, he said, and read aloud. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? The words hung in the humid air between us. I used to think I knew the answer to that, I said. Be a good mother, raise a good man, make sure he had everything I didn't. Turns out that's not enough of an answer. Or maybe it's the wrong question entirely. What's the right question? I thought about it, watching the waves roll in with their ancient rhythm. Maybe. What would I do with this life if I loved myself as much as I loved everyone else? Richard closed the book slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. And what's your answer? I'm starting to figure it out, I said. I think it involves the sea. Then it's a good answer. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost tender. Margaret, you talk about the ocean with such passion that it's impossible not to want to sail with you. My heart did something complicated in my chest. A skip, a flutter, a reminder that it was still capable of wanting things. Maybe we should, I heard myself say. Should what? Sail together. You've been here 3 weeks. How much longer are you staying? As long as it takes, Richard said, though I'm beginning to think what I'm waiting for might already be here. The moon was full that night, turning the ocean silver. We stayed on the veranda until the staff started stacking chairs, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. When we finally stood to leave, Richard touched my shoulder, brief, gentle, and said, "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be alive." I walked back to my room with my skin still warm from his touch, wondering when exactly friendship had started feeling like possibility. I saw them before they saw me. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of perfect Miami day that makes you understand why people abandon their entire lives to live here. I was in the main lobby, arranging orchids for that evening's cocktail reception, when the automatic doors slid open and Daniel walked in. My son, my Daniel, followed by Emily, her hand possessive on his arm, both of them wearing expensive sunglasses and the easy confidence of people accustomed to being somewhere they belong. The orchid stem snapped in my hand. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My body had forgotten how to do anything except stand there, frozen, while my mind screamed contradictory commands. Hide, run, confront, disappear. They were checking in, their voices carrying across the marble floor. Daniel's laugh, still the same laugh I'd heard 1,000 times, echoed through the space like a ghost made solid. "Reservation under Evans," Emily was saying to the receptionist. "We're here for the corporate retreat." Evans, Richard's last name. The resort had mentioned a big booking for a tech company's executive team. I hadn't thought, hadn't even considered. My hands moved automatically, cleaning up the broken orchid, gathering my supplies. I could slip into the back office. They'd never know I was here. I could... "Mom!" Daniel's voice cut through the lobby like a knife. I turned slowly, my professional smile sliding into place, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "Daniel, Emily, what a surprise." He looked older somehow, though it had only been 5 months, or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. Without the filter of desperate maternal love obscuring reality, he'd put on weight around his middle. His hairline had receded further. He looked like a man who'd grown comfortable at the expense of growth. "You work here." Daniel's face had gone pale beneath his tan. "I coordinate events, yes." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Have been for 3 months now. The resort is lucky to have me." Emily recovered first, her social training kicking in. She removed her sunglasses and produced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Margaret, what a coincidence. We had no idea you were in Miami." "Why would you?" The words came out sharper than intended. "We haven't exactly kept in touch." "Mom, I called you. You didn't call back. Once you called once in 5 months to tell me you were having a baby. And you seemed surprised when I didn't fall over myself with gratitude for the update." I could feel eyes on us. Other guests, staff members. I lowered my voice. "But this isn't the time or place. You're guests here. I'm staff. Let me do my job." I moved to the reception desk, confirmed their room assignments with professional efficiency, and explained the evening's cocktail reception. The same reception I'd been arranging orchids for when they arrived. "It's mandatory for the corporate group," I said. 7 o'clock in the West Gardens. Dress is resort elegant." Daniel opened his mouth, closed it again. He looked lost, like a child who'd broken something expensive and couldn't figure out how to glue it back together. "We'll be there," Emily said crisply, taking their room keys. "Come on, Daniel." I watched them walk toward the elevators, Daniel glancing back once with an expression I couldn't read. When they disappeared, my legs nearly gave out. Maria appeared at my elbow. "You okay?" "That was my son," I gathered. She squeezed my shoulder. "You handled that with extraordinary grace. I'd have thrown something." The night's not over yet. The cocktail reception was a special kind of torture. I moved through my duties on autopilot, greeting guests, ensuring drinks were refreshed, coordinating with catering, and all the while, I felt Daniel and Emily watching me. They'd stationed themselves near the bar, Emily's hand never leaving Daniel's arm, her eyes tracking my every movement with something that looked like calculation. Richard found me during a quiet moment. I'd been standing alone at the garden's edge, pretending to check on the lighting, but really just trying to breathe. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "My company organized this retreat. Had I known there was any connection—" "You couldn't have known. I never mentioned Daniel's last name was different from mine." I managed a weak smile. "The universe has a terrible sense of humor. Would you like me to have them moved to a different hotel?" "You'd do that?" "In a heartbeat." His eyes were fierce with protective anger. "No one treats you like that, not on my watch." The declaration warmed something in my chest, but I shook my head. "No, I'm not running anymore. Let them see what I've become without them. Then let me stay close." Just in case. He did. For the rest of the evening, Richard was never more than a few feet away, a quiet presence that steadied me. Guests commented on it, whispered to each other about the handsome older man who seemed so attentive to the event coordinator. I heard one woman say, "She must be someone special," and wanted to believe it. The confrontation came at 9 o'clock. Emily had been drinking steadily, her cheeks flushed, her smile growing more brittle with each glass of wine. Daniel kept trying to steer her toward the exit, but she pulled away from him and made her way directly to me. "This must be so embarrassing for you," she said, her words slightly slurred. "Working here. At your age, serving drinks to people like us." Several guests had stopped talking. The night air suddenly felt too thick. "Emily," Daniel's voice held a warning. "No, Daniel. Someone needs to say it." She turned back to me, swaying slightly. "You think we excluded you from the cruise because I'm cruel? We did it because you don't fit. You never have. Older people like you. You don't adapt to certain environments. You make everything awkward and slow and—" "That's enough." Richard's voice cut through her tirade like steel. He'd appeared beside me, his posture radiating controlled fury. "Mrs. Evans, I suggest you retire for the evening before you say something you'll truly regret." Emily blinked at him, confused. "Who are you?" "Someone who recognizes grace when he sees it." Richard looked at Daniel. "Your mother is the kind of presence that illuminates any room she enters. I'd be the one feeling out of place without her nearby. Perhaps you should consider who really doesn't adapt well to certain environments." The silence was absolute. Emily's face crumpled. Daniel stood frozen, his eyes moving between Richard, his wife, and me, finally seeing perhaps what he'd allowed to happen. I found my voice, steady and clear. "The ocean is vast enough for all of us. Even those who don't deserve it. Good night, Emily, Daniel." I walked away with Richard at my side, my head high, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their own making. The next morning, Daniel appeared outside my office at 7 a.m. I was reviewing vendor invoices, my second cup of coffee growing cold beside my laptop. When I looked up and saw him through the glass door, my first instinct was to lock it. Instead, I stood and opened it. 5 minutes, I said. "I have a staff meeting at 7:30. He looked awful, dark circles under bloodshot eyes. His shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it or hadn't slept at all. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "God, Mom, I'm so sorry. Emily was drunk and horrible, and I should have stopped her sooner. Should have stopped her from getting on the cruise in the first place." I sat back down, gestured for him to take the chair opposite my desk. The power dynamic wasn't lost on either of us. "Should have told her that excluding your mother from a family celebration wasn't acceptable. Should have called more than once in 5 months. Should have noticed I was gone." "I did notice. He rubbed his face with both hands. "I convinced myself you needed space, that you'd reach out when you were ready. I didn't want to push. You didn't want to confront the fact that you'd hurt me." The words landed like stones. Daniel flinched, but didn't argue. "Emily's pregnant and terrified," he said after a moment. "She's been difficult for months. I kept telling myself it was hormones, stress, that it would get better after the baby came. But last night, watching her say those things to you," he looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. "That's who I've let her become. That's who I've become by allowing it. What do you want from me?" "Daniel, I want you to come home. I want to fix this. His voice cracked. "I want my mom back." Something in my chest twisted, the old maternal instinct that had governed my entire adult life. But beneath it was something newer, harder, the self-preservation I'd learned in Helen's living room, the dignity I'd rebuilt in Miami, the understanding that love without boundaries was just another word for self-destruction. "I'm not coming back to Seattle," I said quietly. "This is my home now. But the baby, congratulations on the baby, I mean that sincerely, but I won't be the grandmother who shows up on command and disappears when it's inconvenient. I won't be tolerated either. I'm family, truly family, or I'm not. And if I'm not, that's okay. I've learned to live with it." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing my small office. "You're punishing me." "No, I'm choosing me. There's a difference." He stopped at the window, looking out at the ocean. When he spoke again, his voice was small. "Emily's mother died when she was young. She's always been insecure about family, about sharing me. I thought if I just accommodated her, made her feel secure, she'd eventually relax. Instead, you taught her that sacrificing me was acceptable, that I was negotiable. Yes," the admission came out broken, "and I hate myself for it." We sat in silence, the distance between us measured in more than the few feet across my desk. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd loved unconditionally. But unconditional love, I'd learned, didn't mean accepting unconditional disrespect. "I need to think," Daniel said finally, "about everything, about what kind of father I want to be, what kind of husband. Emily and we're not okay. We haven't been for a while." "Then get help, real help, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Not for me. For yourself, for your marriage, for your child." He nodded, moving toward the door, then stopped. "Mom, that man last night, Richard, are you—" "We're friends, good friends, maybe more, maybe not. But that's my business, Daniel, my life to live." He defended you. "He sees me, really sees me. That's worth more than you know." After he left, I sat alone in my office, shaking. Maria knocked softly and entered with fresh coffee. "You okay?" "I will be." 2 days later, an envelope appeared at my desk. Inside was a handwritten letter on resort stationery. Daniel's cramped handwriting filling 3 pages. He wrote about recognizing his failures, about starting couples therapy with Emily, about wanting to be better, and at the bottom, tucked inside the envelope, was a cruise ticket. For both of us, the note said, 6 months from now, just you and me. If you'll give me another chance to get it right. I held the ticket for a long time, feeling its weight. Then I filed it away in my desk drawer and turned to the day's schedule. That evening, I found Richard waiting on our veranda. He'd extended his stay again, the 3rd time, now a full 6 weeks at the resort. "I have something to show you," he said, offering his hand. We walked to the marina, where a sleek sailboat bobbed gently at the dock. White hull, teak deck, sails furled against the evening sky. "She's mine," Richard said. "Bought her 10 years ago with Sarah. Haven't taken her out since she died, but today I had her brought here from storage." He turned to me, his eyes reflecting the sunset. "I was wondering if you'd like to go sailing, nothing long. Just a sunset cruise, unless you'd prefer something more." "More. I'm thinking of staying in Miami, maybe permanently. I'm tired of that empty house in Boston. Tired of pretending I'm living when I'm just existing." He squeezed my hand. "You showed me it's possible to start over. I'd like to try, and I'd very much like to try with you nearby." The boat rocked gently, inviting behind us. The resort glowed with warm light. Ahead, the ocean stretched infinite and forgiving. I thought about Daniel's ticket, about second chances and boundary setting, about the difference between running away and running toward. "I'd love to go sailing," I said. "And Richard, I'm glad you're staying." He smiled, genuine, reaching his eyes, and helped me aboard as we pulled away from the dock, the wind catching the sails. I looked back at the shore. Somewhere in that resort, my son was trying to figure out how to be better. Somewhere in Seattle, Helen was probably smiling, knowing her words had taken root. And here, on this boat with this man, I was learning that sometimes the sea doesn't take you away from your life. Sometimes it returns you to yourself. The sailboat, Second Wind, Richard had named her, became our refuge. We fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. I'd finish my shifts at the resort, and Richard would be waiting at the marina with wine and cheese, sometimes fresh fish he'd caught that afternoon. We'd sail until the stars emerged, talking or not talking, simply being. I forgot how much I loved this. Richard said one evening, his hands steady on the wheel. Sarah and I used to sail every weekend. After she died, I couldn't even look at the boat without feeling like I was drowning on dry land. What changed? He glanced at me, and in the fading light, his expression was tender. You did. You reminded me that grief doesn't mean giving up everything that brought joy. Sometimes it means finding new joy alongside the old sorrow. I understood that more than he knew. My own grief for the mother-son relationship I'd imagined was still there, would probably always be there, but it had made room for something else. This unexpected companionship, this late-blooming possibility. Daniel called twice more during those weeks, brief conversations, carefully neutral. He was in therapy, he reported. Emily was trying. The baby was healthy. He never asked when I was coming home, and I was grateful for it. I told Emily what you said, he admitted during the second call, about either being family or not. She cried for 2 hours. Our therapist says that's progress, facing what she's done instead of justifying it. And you, I asked, how are you facing what you've done? Silence, then. Every day I wake up and ask myself what kind of father I want to be. And the answer keeps coming back too. Not the kind of son I've been. I'm working on it. Mom, I know it's not enough, but I'm trying. That's all any of us can do, I said, and meant it. Maria promoted me after 4 months. Senior event coordinator, she announced, presenting me with new business cards. You've earned it 10 times over. Plus, it comes with a raise and your own assistant. Think you can handle more responsibility, I laughed. I raised a child alone while working 2 jobs. I think I can manage a few extra events. But it was more than a few. I was coordinating destination weddings now, corporate retreats, high-profile charity galas, my calendar filled with important dates and crucial deadlines. I hired and trained staff. I negotiated contracts. I built something that mattered, Helen called regularly, delighted by my progress. I told you the sea was waiting, she said, though I admit I didn't expect it to deliver quite so much. Richard sounds wonderful. By the way, when do I get to meet this man who's captured your attention? He hasn't captured anything, we're just... Oh, please, I can hear it in your voice. You're glowing through the phone lines. She wasn't wrong. Richard had become essential to my days, though we'd never discussed what we were to each other. We sailed, we talked. Sometimes he'd take my hand, or I'd lean against his shoulder and it felt natural. Easy, like something we'd been doing for decades instead of months. I'm thinking of selling my house in Boston, Richard told me one Saturday as we anchored in a quiet cove. There's a property here. On the water, 3 bedrooms, dock access, room for a garden. Sarah always wanted a garden. He paused, measuring his words. Would you want to see it? Get your opinion. On the house? On the idea of me staying permanently? Being a part of your life here? More than just weekend sailing? My heart stuttered. Richard, I'm not asking you to marry me or move in or anything that would put pressure on what we have. I'm just saying, I'm happy here. Happier than I've been in years. And a significant part of that happiness is you. He turned to face me fully. I like who I am when I'm with you, Margaret. I like who we are together. The water lapped gently against the hull. Seabirds called overhead. The world felt suspended, waiting for my answer. I'd love to see the house, I said softly. And Richard, I like who we are together too. He kissed me then, gentle, questioning, like a man who'd forgotten how, but was willing to remember. I kissed him back, tasting salt air and new beginnings. We stayed in that cove until sunset painted the sky in impossible colors. When we finally sailed back to the marina, I felt different, lighter, like I'd shed the last skin of the woman who'd stood in that Seattle bedroom 5 months ago, heartbroken and diminished. That woman was gone. In her place was someone I was still getting to know, someone braver, more certain, more willing to claim her own happiness. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. It had taken away a cruise and given me an ocean, taken away easy love and given me something more complex and real, taken away the certainty of family and given me the possibility of chosen belonging. At the marina, Richard helped me onto the dock, his hand lingering on mine. Thank you, he said. For what? For saying yes to sailing, to this, to whatever comes next? He smiled and it transformed his entire face. Margaret Thompson, You are the best thing that's happened to me in a very long time. Right back at you. Richard Evans. We walked back toward the resort, our shoulders touching, and I thought about Daniel's ticket in my desk drawer. 6 months from now, he'd want an answer, whether I'd give him that second chance, whether forgiveness was possible. I didn't know yet, but I was learning that not knowing was okay, that I could hold multiple truths at once, loving my son while protecting myself, embracing new love while honoring old grief, being a mother without letting it define my entire existence. The sea had taught me that. The tide comes in and goes out, constant and changing, always moving but always returning. Maybe that's what family was supposed to be. Maybe that's what I could become. The package arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to my office at the resort, where I now spent my days orchestrating other people's celebrations. Inside was a photograph. Daniel holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blue, his face transformed by the exhausted wonder of new fatherhood. On the back, in his handwriting, Matthew Richard Thompson Evans, born October 2nd, 8 pounds, 6 ounces. Perfect. Matthew Richard, they'd given him Richard's name. I set the photo on my desk, next to the picture of Richard and me on second wind, both of us sun-weathered and laughing. A year had passed since that terrible text message, since the cruise that never happened, since my world had cracked open and forced me to rebuild. My phone buzzed. Daniel, as if he could sense me holding his son's photograph. Did you get the package? His voice was tentative, hopeful. Just now he's beautiful, Daniel. He is. A pause, filled with everything unsaid. Emily wants to talk to you if you're willing. I heard movement. Then Emily's voice, quieter than I'd ever heard it, stripped of the sharp edges I'd come to expect. Margaret. She took a shaky breath. I owe you an apology that's about a year overdue. Several apologies, actually. A lifetime of them. Emily, please, let me say this. Another breath, steadying. I was insecure and cruel. I saw you as competition for Daniel's attention, instead of recognizing that a man who loves his mother well is the kind of man who will love his wife well. Our therapist has helped me understand that, helped me understand a lot of things. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry for what I said at the resort, for excluding you from the cruise, for making Daniel choose between us when there never should have been a choice. I closed my eyes, feeling the old wound pulse, but it didn't hurt the way it used to. Time and distance and Richard's steady presence had transformed it into something more like a scar, permanent, but no longer bleeding. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. I really do. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to do better, be better. Matthew deserves a grandmother who's present in his life, and honestly, she laughed wetly, I'm terrified of this whole motherhood thing, and you're the only person I know who raised a child alone and did a damn good job of it. Something in me softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something adjacent to it. The beginning of a thaw. Being terrified means you're taking it seriously, I said. That's a good start. Will you come visit when you're ready? No pressure, no expectations. Just when you're ready. I looked out my office window at the Miami coast, at the life I'd built from the wreckage of rejection. Maybe, in time, for now, send pictures. Tell me about him. Let's start there. Okay. Relief flooded her voice. Okay, thank you, Margaret, for not shutting the door completely. Life's too short for permanently closed doors, I said. But some doors need to stay mostly closed while everyone figures out how to be better. That's where we are. After we hung up, I sat with my coffee and Matthew's photograph, thinking about second chances and whether I'd use the cruise ticket Daniel had given me months ago. It still sat in my desk drawer, an invitation to what used to be, but I had other plans now. Richard appeared in my doorway, holding 2 paper bags from our favorite Cuban bakery. Lunch break? I thought we could eat on the boat. I smiled, gathering my things. Perfect, I have news. On second wind, anchored in our usual spot, I showed him Matthew's photo. Richard studied it with the careful attention he gave everything that mattered to me. He has Daniel's nose, he observed, and your eyes, I think, or maybe that's wishful seeing. They named him after you. Middle name. Richard looked up surprised. Really? Matthew Richard. Daniel said it's because you showed him what it means to honor someone you love, to stand up for them. I took his hand. They want me to visit eventually. And do you want to? I don't know yet. It doesn't feel urgent the way it used to. Like my worth depends on whether I'm invited into their lives. I leaned against him, feeling the boat rock gently beneath us. I think maybe I'll meet my grandson, set some boundaries, see if we can build something healthier. But on my terms this time. That sounds wise. Helen would be proud. Speaking of which, she's flying in next month. Says she needs to inspect this man who's monopolized her protege's time. Richard laughed. Should I be nervous? Terrified. Helen doesn't suffer fools, and her standards are impossibly high. I kissed his cheek. Lucky for you, you're neither foolish nor ordinary. We ate our sandwiches and watched the pelicans dive for fish. Richard told me about the progress on his house, our house. Though we'd never formally discussed me moving in, I was spending most nights there anyway, in the bedroom that overlooked the water, in the life we were building together without rush or pressure. I've been thinking, Richard said, wiping crumbs from his hands, about taking second wind on a longer voyage, maybe the Keys or the Bahamas. 2 weeks. Just us and the ocean. What do you think? I think I'd love that, I smiled. I think I finally got my cruise after all, just not the one I was expecting. The best journeys never are. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, I thought about that text message from a year ago. Don't come on the cruise tomorrow. The 12 words that had shattered my world, and in shattering it, had forced me to build something better. I'd been so devastated that day, folding that blue dress and putting it away, believing I'd lost my chance at the ocean. But I'd been wrong. The ocean had been waiting all along, not on some predetermined cruise ship, but here, in these unexpected waters, with this unexpected man, living this unexpected life. Thank you, I said to Richard, though the words were meant for more than just him, for Helen, who'd shown me the path, for Maria, who'd given me purpose, for Daniel, in a strange way, for setting me free, for myself, for having the courage to step onto that boat when everything in me wanted to stay safe and small. For what? Richard asked. For reminding me that it's never too late to sail towards something instead of away from it. He pulled me close, and we watched the sunset in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of loss, who'd learned that endings could be beginnings if you were brave enough to let them. The boat rocked gently beneath us. The waves whispered their eternal rhythm. And somewhere in Seattle, a baby boy named Matthew Richard was learning what it meant to be loved. Maybe someday I'd tell him about the grandmother who almost gave up on the ocean, who almost let rejection define her, who almost forgot that she was more than the love she gave away. But then I'd tell him the better part, how she found her way back to herself, how she learned to sail, how she discovered that family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you choose, the one you build, the one that chooses you back, and how, in the end, the cruise she didn't take led her to something infinitely better, a life that was finally, beautifully, undeniably her own.